It started with a tug. Janiya Cole sat at her desk in the second row, back straight, eyes focused on the math worksheet in front of her. The room was quiet, save for the soft scratching of pencils on paper and the occasional murmur of students. The faint smell of pencil shavings mixed with the distant scent of cafeteria nuggets wafting from a hallway. Outside the classroom window, rows of sun-faded lockers reflected the Carolina sunlight, the bright light almost blinding even in late November. Mrs. Langley, their teacher, had just turned to write a new equation on the board when Janiya felt it. A slight tug at the back of her hair. She shifted in her seat, trying to brush it off, but then came the sharp sting. It felt like her hair had fused to the collar of her shirt. She reached back slowly, her fingers brushing something sticky. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Langley asked, not turning around. Janiya didn't answer. She could feel it now. Her hair was stuck. It wasn't a small knot or a tangle. It was thick and sticky. Her fingers tangled in what felt like glue, thick, dry in some spots, still warm in others. A murmur bubbled up from the table behind her, and someone laughed. Then came the voice she already expected. "Dang, Jeanette, what kind of condition are you using?" It was Chase Welling, the loud, always grinning boy who made jokes even when no one else did. His voice carried across the room, and a few other students chuckled nervously. It wasn't because they thought it was funny, but because it was safer to laugh than to be next in line for Chase's cruel words. Janiya's breathing quickened. She turned her head slightly, looking for someone to help, but she knew no one would. Her hair wouldn't budge. It was stuck. Panic rose in her chest like water filling a sink, and her heart began to race. Mrs. Langley turned around, her eyes scanning the room for the cause of the commotion. "Quiet down, everyone. Janiya, are you okay?" Janiya shook her head slowly, her eyes scanning the classroom. She didn't even know who had done it, but she could feel it, the sticky mess in her hair. Something was wrong. "There's something in my hair," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Several students had their phones out by now. She could see them pretending to type, but she knew they were recording. They were recording her pain, her humiliation. It wasn't just about the glue. It was about them laughing, them watching her, and doing nothing. Mrs. Langley walked over to Janiya, bent down to inspect the mess. Her face changed when she saw the extent of it. "Oh, she stammered. "Come with me. Let's get you to the nurse." As Janiya stood up, she felt her hair tear slightly at the roots. She winced in pain as a few strands ripped free. There were audible gasps from the other students. Someone whispered she's going to be bald. But Janiya didn't cry. Not yet. She just stared down at her desk, at the clear smear of gooey glue that had yet to dry. It was a mark of what had happened, of what had been done to her. On the floor beneath Chase's chair, there was an empty bottle of Gorilla Glue. No one said anything about it. But Janiya noticed the way some of her classmates turned their faces away quickly, as if they didn't want to get involved. The nurse, Miss Bernard, was kind but cautious. She kept biting her lip, unsure of what to say. "I'm going to have to cut some of it out," she said gently, almost apologetically. "There's just no other way." Janiya sat still, all of it feeling like a cruel joke. She didn't speak, just nodded. "It's in deep," Miss Bernard hesitated, clearly not wanting to hurt her more. "We can try to save some, but it's going to hurt." When Mr. Holbrook, the assistant principal, came in, he sighed, as if this was just another inconvenience to deal with. "Well, it looks like someone made a poor decision," he muttered under his breath. "Probably didn't think it would cause this much trouble. Kids mess around sometimes." Janiya stared at him, her scalp burning, the pain still fresh. Her hair was glued together in a painful clump at the back of her neck, and he was worried about how it would affect the classroom atmosphere. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. Mr. Holbrook nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact with her. "No one's blaming you," he said dismissively, "but we'll take it seriously, of course. Just don't escalate this. We don't want it to divide the classroom." Divide the classroom? She nearly laughed out loud, but there was no humor in it. Her scalp throbbed. Her hair was stuck, torn, and now she had to face the fact that it would be cut, all while the people around her acted like this was just a minor inconvenience. They gave her a headscarf from the lost and found box. It was pale green with a tiny embroidered duck on the edge. It smelled faintly of old gym clothes, but she took it anyway, her heart sinking. But Janiya wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She wasn't just going to let this go. She wouldn't let this define her. That afternoon at home, she sat on a low stool while her mother, Noelle, gently separated what she could from the dried mess in her hair. The silence between them was thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on the walls. Noelle kept her voice low, steady, trying to be gentle. "Baby, I need to snip a little more, all right?" she asked, her hand shaking slightly as she tried to help. Janiya didn't answer. She just blinked tiredly. Every time the scissors clicked, another piece of her confidence fell to the floor. Thick coils of hair she had spent years growing, were being cut away. Each strand felt like a small piece of herself was lost, a part of her dignity and peace being taken from her. "Did the school call you?" she finally whispered. Noelle paused, looking up at her daughter. Mr. Holbrook left a message. Janiya turned slightly, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" Noelle sighed through her nose, her lips pressed together. "He said it was a prank that went too far. Said they'll talk to the student responsible, that they don't want it turning into a racial issue." Janiya blinked, confused. "A racial issue?" "That's what he said," Noelle replied, her voice tight. "But Chase said stuff before." Janiya continued, her voice rising slightly. "About my hair. About how I should wash it more. About how it's fake. He said I looked like a mop." Noelle paused cutting. She gently placed her hands on Janiya's shoulders. "I know, baby. Why didn't they do anything before?" Janiya's voice cracked. "Because schools don't always protect who they should." Noelle crouched down in front of her daughter, her face soft but serious. "But I do." Janiya looked away, her throat tight. "I don't want to go back." "You will," Noelle said firmly. But everyone saw it. They laughed. Some of them were recording. "I don't want to be a meme," Janiya whispered. Noelle paused, then gently tilted her daughter's chin, ensuring their eyes met. "You won't be a meme. You're not a joke. You're a girl who got hurt and didn't deserve it. And you're going to show them exactly who you are. Not with your fists, with your presence." Janiya frowned. "How?" "We'll think of something together," Noelle said. But she didn't tell her daughter to fight back. She told her to show the world who she really was. That night, they didn't turn on the TV. No music, no background noise. Just the two of them, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, a spiral notebook between them. "What would make you feel strong again?" Noelle asked, her voice low but steady. Janiya chewed on her bottom lip, not hiding her thoughts. "I don't want to cry in front of them." "You won't," Noelle assured her. "I want you to say something, but like to everybody, not just Chase." "We'll make it happen," Noelle said. Noelle spent the rest of the evening working her phone, typing emails and contacting anyone who could help. She had a friend who worked in the district, another who knew a school board rep. She wasn't rich, but she had resolve. And sometimes that was louder than money. Meanwhile, Janiya wrote. She wrote about how it felt to walk through hallways where no one spoke up for her, how it felt to pretend she was fine just to keep others comfortable, and how her hair was a part of her. Losing it wasn't just about a prank. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. She wrote for an hour, then 2. Her mother looked over her shoulder, silently wiping a tear from her cheek. "You sure you want to say this out loud?" Noelle asked softly. Janiya nodded. "We're going to need a mic." Noelle smiled, tight and proud. They both knew it was time. The next morning, Janiya stood outside the school doors, the cold morning air biting against her skin. She had her gray hoodie pulled up over her head, the same headscarf tied beneath it. But this time, it wasn't about hiding. It was just temporary. The cool breeze against her bare scalp, where her curls used to be, made her feel raw, not just from the glue, but from everything it symbolized. Her mom, Noelle, was parked a few feet away in a rust-red Nissan Altima, watching her. Before Janiya stepped inside, Noelle rolled the window down. "You got your paper?" Noelle asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Janiya patted her backpack. "Right here." You sure you want to do this today? Noelle asked again, her voice softer now, almost as if she wanted to protect her daughter from the challenge ahead. Janiya nodded slowly. I have to. Noelle smiled, tight but proud. All right then. Show 'em. Janiya gave a small wave, and with a deep breath, she walked toward the school entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't fear she felt. It was alive. It was the kind of heartbeat that told her she was about to make her mark no matter what. Inside the school, everything felt the same. The dull tiles underfoot, the buzzing lights overhead, and the usual flow of students rushing past her as though nothing had happened. But today felt different. It felt heavier. She couldn't shake the sensation that 1,000 eyes were watching her, even the ones pretending not to look. Every corner, every hallway felt like it was holding its breath. She walked through the crowded hallways, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her, not necessarily in pity, but in curiosity. She couldn't tell if they were waiting for her to break or waiting for her to rise. There was no escaping the feeling that every moment was being watched, every step tracked. Mr. Holbrook, the assistant principal, spotted her from across the hall. He quickly walked up to her, clipboard in hand, his expression somewhat uneasy. Miss Cole, can I speak with you for a moment? He asked, his voice lowering as if trying to keep things under control. Janiya stopped in her tracks and turned to face him. She already knew what he was going to say. I heard from your mother, he began, glancing at his clipboard. She requested that you speak at the end of today's student assembly. I just want to confirm. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with that? Janiya blinked slowly. Yes, sir. Holbrook hesitated, his eyes darting around, clearly trying to manage the situation. It might cause a reaction, he said quietly, clearly trying to downplay the potential impact. Just be aware. Janiya didn't flinch. I'm aware, she said, her voice calm and steady. He nodded, more to himself than to her. Okay, I'll let Miss Diaz know to fit you in. You'll have a few minutes toward the end. Janiya gave a small nod, turning toward her first class. But all she could think about now was the assembly. It was only a few hours away, and the anticipation weighed on her like a thick blanket. The rest of the day blurred together. She couldn't focus on anything. The lessons, the questions from teachers, they all seemed distant. Her mind was fixed on what was coming. Finally, the bell rang for the 5th period, signaling the end of the day's classes. Students began filing into the gymnasium for the student assembly. Rows of fold-out chairs lined the polished wooden floor, and a small stage stood at the front, with a worn microphone on a silver stand. The gym was loud. Students were joking, texting, tossing wrappers and bins. Chase Welling, surrounded by his usual group of friends, sat near the middle, his feet resting on the chair in front of him. He wore a baseball hoodie, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face. He hadn't looked at her once since the incident. Miss Diaz, the school counselor, stood at the mic, tapping it twice to get everyone's attention. All right, everyone, settle down, please. We're going to get started. She spoke for a few minutes about upcoming field trips, club meetings, and reminders to clean up after lunch. But Janiya barely heard her. She was sitting in the front row, gripping her folded paper with both hands, her legs bouncing nervously beneath the seat. Her heart was thudding in her chest. You're up in 2, Miss Diaz whispered to her, giving her a brief, encouraging smile. Janiya stood, her legs feeling like they were made of jelly. As she walked to the stage, the noise of the gym faded into the background, and a quiet, tense silence began to settle. At first, the students didn't pay much attention. Some were still texting, others were distracted. But as soon as Janiya stepped up onto the stage, the murmurs started to die down. There was a palpable shift in the air. The microphone squeaked as she adjusted it, and she stood there for a moment, just breathing. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper, glancing down at the words she had written. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But then she looked up at the crowd, her gaze steady and strong. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The room fell into a deep silence. Janiya didn't speak for 5 full seconds. And then, when she did, her voice was clear and steady. My name is Janiya Cole. I'm 12 years old, and and I want to talk about what happened to me this week." A few heads lifted. A few phones began recording. But it wasn't just about the glue in her hair anymore. It was about something much deeper. Something she was about to make everyone face. "I want to talk about why it happened," she continued, her voice firm, "and what it means when people laugh instead of help." She took a deep breath, her chest tightening slightly, but she didn't falter. "I was sitting at my desk when a classmate poured glue into my hair. I didn't see it coming. I felt it. When I tried to move, my hair was stuck to my shirt." A few heads turned toward Chase, who shifted in his seat, his face turning pink. He didn't say a word. "I didn't scream," Janiya said, her voice quiet but clear. "I didn't cry. I just sat there, trying to stay calm while it dried on my scalp." The gym was still. It was like every student, every teacher, was holding their breath. "I went to the nurse," Janiya continued. "I was told I'd need to cut my hair. Not trim it. Cut it off. They said it was just a prank. That no one meant for it to be this bad." She let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting her words sink in. But what if it hadn't been glue? What if it was something worse? Would it still be a prank? Or would it finally matter? Some students looked down at their shoes. Others stared straight ahead. There were a few who couldn't look at her at all. And then there was Chase, who didn't make eye contact with her once. "You didn't have to pour the glue to be part of it," she said. Some of you laughed. Some of you said nothing. Some of you filmed me while I sat in pain. You didn't have to pour the glue to be a part of it. Her words were like a blow to the gut, but she wasn't done yet. "You might think hair doesn't matter, that it's just hair, but it's not. Not to me. I didn't wear weaves. I didn't straighten it. This was mine. Natural. Real. It took years to grow. And now it's gone." She paused for a moment, running a hand up to the edge of her hood. The room gasped not loudly, but audibly. Janiya slowly pulled the hood back, revealing the uneven patches where her hair had been torn or shaved off. "I didn't come up here to make anyone feel bad," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "I came up here to remind you that how you treat someone matters. That laughing when someone's hurt isn't harmless. That silence helps the people doing wrong." She paused again, letting her words resonate. "I'm not broken," she said, looking directly at the audience. "And I'm not going to hide. Not from you. Not from anyone." There was a brief moment of silence before one teacher clapped once, then another, and then others joined in. Students started to stand, slowly at first, then with more confidence. A girl in the third row, Tara, walked up to Janiya without asking and gave her a hug. Others followed. Janiya stood there, surrounded by students she'd never spoken before. They whispered that they were sorry, that they were proud of her. But most importantly, they finally saw her. Miss Diaz, the school counselor, walked over, placing a hand on Janiya's shoulder. "You want to go sit down?" Janiya nodded just a little, but enough for everyone to know that she had said what needed to be said. She stepped down from the platform, not in a rush, not fleeing, but like she had just made her mark, like she was exactly where she needed to be. She didn't look back at Chase as she walked past him. She didn't need to. He didn't look at her either. He just stared at the floor the entire time. By the time Janiya reached her classroom, her phone was buzzing incessantly with messages, not from strangers, but from classmates, kids she barely knew, who hadn't even spoken to her all year. The messages kept coming, fast and steady. I didn't know what to say back then. "I'm sorry. That was brave. Seriously. I cried a little. Don't tell anyone." She didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. She needed to process what had just happened. For the first time in days, her shoulders weren't tense. Her fingers weren't clenching anything. She sat at her desk, letting herself just be, for once. Meanwhile, the school office was in chaos. Parents started calling in before the assembly had even ended. Someone had gone live from the gym, and clips were already circulating online. By late afternoon, the local news had caught wind of it. As for Chase, he was pulled from class, not by security or the police, but by Mr. Holbrook, the assistant principal, who asked him to come to the office quietly. Janiya didn't see him the rest of the day. She didn't care to. By the time the final bell rang, Miss Langley, her teacher, walked over to her and crouched down beside her desk. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with concern. Janiya nodded. "Yeah." Miss Langley hesitated, as though there was more she wanted to say but didn't know how. "I'm proud of you," she added softly. Janiya gave a small, tired smile. "Thanks." When she stepped outside, her mom, Noelle, was waiting at the curb. Janiya got in, closed the door, and for a minute, neither of them spoke. The world outside the car seemed distant, almost muffled. After a moment, Noelle broke the silence. "You did it!" Janiya leaned back in the seat. "I don't know what I did, but yeah, I did it." Her mom laughed softly, a sound full of warmth and pride. "You changed something." The next day, things were different. Not perfect, but different. For starters, Chase Welling was suspended for 10 days. It wasn't the first time he'd had behavioral incidents. His record had been less than stellar, but this one couldn't be ignored, especially not now. Not after it had been seen by thousands of people on phones, tablets, Twitter feeds. That afternoon, the principal called an emergency staff meeting. Teachers were asked to be more vigilant in the classroom. A message was sent to all parents, reminding them about the importance of creating a safe and inclusive learning environment. But the part that mattered most to Janiya wasn't the suspension. It wasn't the statement from the school. It was the way people looked at her now, not with pity, but with respect. In the hallways, the 7th grader she barely knew smiled at her and said, "Hey, your hair looks strong." Not pretty, not nice, strong. Janiya held on to that word for the rest of the day. Strong. It was more than just a compliment. It was a recognition of what she had gone through and how she had stood up for herself. At lunch, a group of boys who had once joked behind her back stood quietly as she walked by. They didn't say much, but they didn't laugh. Sometimes silence was its own apology. During science class, Miss Cardenas had the class discuss personal ethics and courage. Janiya noticed that the lesson wasn't in the textbook. Later that week, she was pulled into the media center, where a woman in a black blazer introduced herself as a journalist from a local station. Janiya glanced at her mom, who had taken the day off to be there, and gave a small nod. The interview was quick, soft lighting, one camera. The journalist asked questions about how she felt, what she wanted people to know, and what she would say to someone else going through the same thing. Janiya answered calmly, without notes. "I want people to stop waiting until someone's hurt to care," she said. "I want schools to stop brushing things off until they go viral. I want girls like me to stop feeling like they have to be silent." When the segment aired, it was only 2 minutes long, but it was enough. Enough to make a middle school girl in another state email her. Enough to get a school board member to request a meeting. Enough to matter. But Janiya didn't want the fame. She wanted the right thing to be done, and done for the right reasons. By the end of the week, people were paying attention, not just in the school, but across the district. A nearby high school invited Janiya to speak during their morning announcements. A community center in Asheville reached out to her mother, asking if she could join a youth panel. Someone even mentioned that a city councilwoman had shared the clip of her speech online, calling it a moment that reminded us of the power in our children's voices. But at home, Janiya was still just Janiya. She took the trash out, fed the cat, and helped her mom wash the dishes. Life didn't pause just because people suddenly decided she mattered. She still woke up with a sore spot on the back of her head. She still caught her reflection sometimes and felt that strange ache of loss. Not just of hair, but of something quieter, something taken from her. She was still trying to name it. One night, she sat on the edge of her bed, her knees pulled to her chest, while Noelle folded laundry at the foot of the bed. The local news was playing in the background, rerunning her story for the 3rd night in a row. "I didn't think they'd care this much," Janiya said quietly. Noelle didn't look up from the laundry. "They care because you didn't stay quiet." Janiya stared at her comforter. "I didn't even say anything new. People go through stuff like this all the time." Noelle paused, folding a shirt carefully. "Exactly. You said what people already feel, but are too scared to say out loud." Janiya nodded, but she didn't respond. She wasn't sure what else to say. I didn't do it to be famous, she finally whispered. I know that, Noelle said softly. And the right people know it too. There were still days when Janiya felt small, but not invisible. Chase returned to school after a suspension, keeping his head down. No jokes, no loud whispers, no smug grins. He didn't speak to Janiya, and she didn't go looking for an apology. One afternoon, she passed him in the hall and saw the principal walking beside him, clipboard in hand. Chase didn't make eye contact, but his steps were slower, like he knew he wasn't untouchable anymore. Later that week, Miss Langley handed out a new classroom rule sheet, one with a section specifically addressing harassment and nonverbal bullying. Every student had to initial it quietly. Some rolled their eyes, others just signed it, but the point had been made. Even some of the teachers changed the way they interacted with the students. The social studies teacher started opening up conversations about responsibility and what it meant to protect one another. The librarian added new books to the display shelf, books by authors Janiya had never seen in the school before. Something was shifting. It wasn't perfect, but it was starting. One afternoon, as Janiya packed up her things, Tara, the girl who had hugged her during the assembly, walked over. I like what you said, she murmured. I didn't like what happened, but I liked how you stood up there. Janiya smiled softly. Tara hesitated before speaking again. I'm trying to grow my hair natural again. Janiya tilted her head. Yeah, Tara said, smiling. My mom keeps telling me to straighten it for picture day, but I don't want it anymore. Janiya nodded slowly. You shouldn't have to change it. Tara smiled back. I know now. They didn't say anything else, but they didn't need to. In the end, Janiya didn't need a stage to matter. She didn't need a camera or applause. What she needed and what she got was a chance to be seen clearly, to say what she felt and know that someone out there, even just one person, heard her. That was enough for now. But there was still one thing left to say. A few weeks passed. The hallway whispers faded. The phone stopped recording. Attention drifted to other school drama. A lost backpack, a fight behind the gym, the upcoming winter dance. Life at Henderson Middle moved on. But Janiya didn't forget. Not when she stood in front of the mirror, brushing the baby hairs at her hairline, trying to shape something soft around the new growth. Not when she saw another girl flinch as a group of boys started laughing too loudly behind her in the cafeteria. Not when she walked into class and saw teachers watching a little more carefully, asking questions a little more gently. She noticed, quietly, carefully, there were still days when she felt small, but not invisible. One Tuesday afternoon, Miss Diaz pulled her aside after lunch and handed her a thick envelope. Some of these letters are for you, she said, her voice soft. Janiya opened it when she got home. There were over 30 letters inside. One from a 6th grade girl named Ruby, who said she wore a wig because of a skin condition and that watching Janiya speak gave her the courage to finally stop hiding behind her hoodie. One from a boy who said he'd laughed the day of the glue incident, but it had bothered him all week. He didn't know how to apologize, so he wrote it down. There was a note from an older woman, a grandmother of another student, who simply said, Your story made me cry. I hope my grandkids grow up to be as brave as you. Janiya sat on her bed and read every single one, then folded them up, carefully tucking them into a shoebox and sliding it under her bed. Not to forget, but to remember. Even when people act like they're not paying attention, they are. At school, she never got an apology from Chase, but she no longer needed one. What he had taken from her wasn't hers anymore. It had already grown into something stronger. Her hair was slowly coming back, uneven still but steady, and for the first time, she didn't dream of it being long again. She just wanted it to feel like hers. No expectations, no shame. During the last week before winter break, her principal asked if she'd be willing to record a message for a school-wide anti-bullying campaign. She agreed, but only if she could write herself. She stood in front of a small video crew, with Miss Diaz watching from behind the camera. She wore no scarf, no hoodie, just a simple black T-shirt, and a little gold necklace her grandmother had given her for her 12th birthday. She looked into the camera and said, My name is Janiya Cole. I used to think that being quiet kept me safe, that staying invisible meant no one could hurt me. But the truth is, silence doesn't protect you. It just lets the wrong people get louder. She paused for a moment and then smiled gently. You don't have to shout to be strong. You just have to stand. The video didn't go viral. It didn't need to. It stayed inside the school, shown during homeroom, shared with new students, and used as part of staff training. But for every kid sitting in the back, wondering if their voice mattered, it did. And for the ones who thought they could get away with small cruelties, whispered jokes, or careless pranks, it reminded them there's always someone watching, someone listening, someone who will speak up, because one girl did. Not to be a hero, not for applause, but because sometimes when the world shrinks you, the only thing left to do is grow anyway. So she did.